Hello and welcome to episode 97 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is June 15th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So
Hello.
Some episodes ago, we had already talked about several Azure tools and frameworks for SAP with Etienne and Jitendra. Then beginning of the year, we had Philipp Leitenbauer joining us to talk about the quality check tool for SAP on Azure. And today we have Jitendra back with Ross, who was also on the show before, to talk about the new AZ Health Check functionalities. But before we hand over to them for an introduction and some nice demos, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And I want to start with a new video that we published on the Microsoft Purview channel. So basically, Chandra, Martin, and myself, we recorded another video on how you can work with SAP and Microsoft Purview. So if you hadn't enough from our episode here on our podcast, then head over to the Purview channel and take a look at another view on how to work with SAP and Microsoft Microsoft Purview specifically. Then the next thing, Geert, he was also on the show some time back. So talking about Azure NetApp, he released a new article here on the tech community about manual recovery for SAP HANA on Azure VMs from Azure NetApp file snapshots with AZ Snap. That's still hard to pronounce from my point of view. So it's a very lengthy document that outlines how you can really use HANA Studio to recover from your Azure NetApp files. And it's a very detailed. So with lots of, you can see here, there are tons of screenshots to really guide you through the process of how to do this. So I think definitely if you are using Azure NetApp files, I think that's definitely also something to take a look at. Then Goran, there was another interesting blog post from Dennis.
Yes, a new interesting really blog on HANA Scale Up HA with DR. So if you go maybe just to the a little bit down to the picture, I mean, honestly, I often hear this, customer wants to have a high availability inside one region. They might even go across the zones, and they also want to do a DR, and a DR region, they also want an HA pair. So basically they are fully independent. You are an HA across the zones, across the two data center, and then you have DR, and there you're also in the zones across the two data center, right? So it's a kind of holy grail, like many customers I'm seeing they want to do. This is specifically targeting the HANA itself and HANA on the Red Hat, not the rest of the stuff, but still it is important, right? Yeah. And it's utilizing a so-called HANA multi-target system replication. You would have two clusters there with pacemaker. So this is also article also kind of jointly done with the SUSE. There is a link on a SUSE document how to implement it as well. Currently, there is a disclaimer that there is no official support yet. Okay, yeah. I still trying to figure it out or getting feedback information why. Or when that will be, when we will get it, but definitely it is. I mean, somebody was testing the whole procedure, right? It's more claiming that they want to know sure that the guy who is implementing know what he's doing, right? Yeah. I mean, an excellent article, and I would say it's a kind of holy grail for the many customer in Azure who are doing HA plus DR. So more than welcome to check it, with the detailed steps how to do it. Yeah.
Perfect.
So we can go next.
Then the next, exactly. There was a tweet actually from Sven Kohlhaas from SAP about SAP Private Link. So we've talked about Private Link for quite some time. So if you're running the business technology platform on Azure, if you have your SAP workload on Azure, then you can set up a private link connectivity between those two, so that basically you don't need to open up internet connectivity from your SAP environment, in order to connect to the business technology platform. So I think that is a very, very interesting scenario, and we have some customers that are really security sensitive, that don't want to open up anything, and for them this is a perfect way to still use the business technology platform and connect it to your SAP systems on Azure in a secure way. Now, SAP has started a customer engagement initiative on this, where you can influence and shape the future of this service. The service is currently available as a beta service on business technology platform, and here with the customer engagement initiative, you have a great opportunity to influence the direction where this is going. So you need an S user to sign up, but definitely check this out if you're interested in. Then, speaking of tweets, you might have seen yesterday or on Monday a lot of tweets with this ninja cat at Kowai hashtag. And the reason for that was Martin Pankratz had a session with Will Eastbury. So both of them already talked also here on our channel about OData, about the API management, about an SAP system and consuming this information via a Power App, for example. And Martin and Will both attended the Integrate conference in London that is currently going on. And there they had a very interactive session where Martin and Will, they demoed this flow. Actually, they had a Twitter hashtag, basically, this ninja cat. And if you scanned the QR code and were there at the conference, you could get some cool stickers from Martin. So I thought this is definitely a very interesting scenario that we see with lots of customers now, that you have an OData service on the SAP side. You need to have the whole single sign-on flow. And with this concept that they have configured to convert the OData information or the dollar metadata information from the OData service into a Swagger specification, and then exposing this to an API management, do the authentication, and then being able to consume this in Power Platform is obviously something that is a very, very strong story, I would say. So with this quick news, we can actually already start with our main topic today. So as said, we have Jitendra and Ross with us. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, and then I'm really looking forward to learning more about the health check on Azure. Jitendra, you're on mute.
No.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, hi. I'm really excited to come back on this video podcast. My name is Jitendra Singh. I'm working as a principal program manager with my colleague Ross. We are part of customer-facing engineering team. Ross?
Yeah, Jitendra and I are on the same team. I'm covering mostly US customers right now. Strangely enough, on the East Coast, it seems. I'm located in Seattle. And yeah, have been working with SAP on Azure really for quite a few years.
And you forget me, guys, as a part of
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, so with that, we'll start with why we need SAP and Azure Health Check. So as part of our team, as Gaurav and Ross mentioned, we are part of customer-facing engineering team, and we work at several engagements. And we often find out that there are some errors or outages or performance issues that are reported that could be avoided. So one of the area that we started focusing last year was how can we empower our customers and partners with tools that can give them that insight to say, okay, am I following the best practices from configuration perspective? It can be your platform level. So from a Azure perspective, whether accelerated networking is enabled or not, whether you are using write disk caching, whether you have configured backups on your virtual machine, or some areas of orphan resources to make sure you are using a good, healthy housekeeping best practices. At the same time, we are also engaging at customers where we have SUSE cluster. So there are tools that will also help you to get visibility from the OS level, whether their OS parameters are in line with the best practices, whether like, there are some of the areas in pacemaker itself, whether resources are set up or not. So that's the idea with Azure Health Check. So I will quickly, take a step back to say, when we came here last time, we were talking about tools and frameworks, and we had a session on assessment. So, okay, sorry, I'm trying to go back now. So when we talk about tools and framework, there are two sets that we really focus from our customer perspective. So one is assessment. That covers your design consideration. So when you want to deploy your SAP solution on Azure, you need to make sure you are aware of what are the critical design areas that should be in place. So that's covered by assessment. Now today, we will be focusing on the tools that we have that will give you the insights from your subscription and OS level, so that you are aware what OS parameters or what configurations are in place. And this is more of a journey. When customer is going to start on their cloud journey with Azure platform, they will always engage with us using enterprise scale landing zone, which is part of assessment. And during the deployment, they will start using health check, and that will ensure their implementation or migration is de-risked. Right. With that, I will talk about health check. So what is it? It's a 4-step process. So we have different tools as part of health check. Now, why we have different tools is like different customers might have different requirements, right? And there are like different security postures. So sometimes customers will prefer to only run platform level checks, right? Or sometimes customers might be okay for us to connect to their virtual machine. So that's why we wanted to make sure we can provide some flexibility and give customer option to decide what is best tool for them to go through. Who is it for? This is really targeted at a technical level. So basis team, cloud architects, and mid-level IT management can make use of this tool to ensure they have a good visibility of what is deployed. Why we are doing this? This is again, we want to make sure we provide our partners and customers with tool so that they can review or they can use it as a regular health check whenever they are doing minor release or major release. They have visibility so that they can maintain and improve the quality of SAP deployment onto Azure platform.
I think,
with that, I will.
Yeah. If you don't mind me jumping in here for just a second, I think what we find is a lot of customers will design out what they want to have happen in their production environment, all the configurations and settings and whatnot. But then due to maybe human error or bugs in their automation, that the actual deployed configuration doesn't match what they had designed. And so really what I think this is great for making sure those things are aligned.
Yeah, and I would say, Ross, also what I see, it's we, Microsoft, with SAP and partners are also changing the best practices as we learn. So what today is valid, maybe in 2 months is not, right? And so these kind of tool really then helps to be always up to date, that okay, what are the latest recommendations, because it's super difficult to follow them online where they are and what it needs to be done. So yeah, that's one of the big feedback from the customer, that such tools are really, really helpful, right?
Yep, that's great. Thanks for adding it. So what we have as part of health check is like, first is Azure deployment checklist for SAP. Now this is a Azure workbook and it is available on our GitHub. It really indicates what are the key checkpoints you need to go through when you are preparing your SAP on Azure program from a deployment perspective. So you can also say this is more of a program management tool where like you're going through project preparation and planning phase, or say POC phase, or non-production, production, post go live. So these are the different phases SAP on Azure program will go through. So this checklist will help you to ensure, as Goran mentioned, you are connected to the latest innovation and best practices from Azure, and then you are aware like what can be done in next cycle of your minor or major release. The second component is really Azure inventory checks for SAP. Now this is really a Azure workbook. Now what we wanted to do is like many customers, they usually have an infra team and then they will have a SAP application team. and SAP application team will not have access to infra like Azure portal, and vice versa. So what we wanted to make sure is like we provide a tool that suits this kind of scenario where infra guys can basically make use of our workbook and get a quick visibility saying, okay, how many virtual machines are there? Am I using right caching, or am I using right generation of the SKU? So those kind of visibility will be provided by Azure Workbook, and we'll go in demo. The next tool is quality checks, and Philip already came here and he had like dedicated session on quality checks. So we will not cover that. But then the last tool that we have is Linux VMOS Analyzer, and that's really a tool where like if customer is looking for another option to say like how can I like review or do a quick health check of my OS without really connecting or running PowerShell, then they can simply rely on the OS native tools like support config or SS report. And then Ross will talk more about it. So before I hand over to Ross, like let's talk about the flow, right? So if a customer is looking to make use of health check like tool, so the way they are going to proceed is they will always start with the deployment checklist. And then once they are clear with that, okay, what are my checklist items? Sorry, there's a problem with the slide. What are the key checklist items they need to go through? Then they will start deploying resources onto Azure platform. Now, as soon as they have deployed the like landing zones, VNet, subnet, virtual machine, and disk, they really want to have insights to say like, okay, what is really deployed onto my platform? That's where like Azure Inventory Checks for SAP will be very useful. And then once they start deploying their SAP and database, then they can either connect to quality checks or they can make use of Linux VMOS Analyzer to get the visibility of what is being configured at OS level. So with that, Ross, do you want to share your experience of using Linux VMOS Analyzer?
Yeah, well, so why don't we go on to the next slide? Right, that's the next one. But the VMOS Analyzer, we really have had two scenarios. One, which is when customers are able to connect to anything in their environment and have a lot of flexibility, and that's where the health check or quality check works really well, and it gives a comprehensive check of the whole environment. But then we also have kind of the flip side of customers who are really locked down in their environments and have a very difficult time, for example, installing new tools and having access to the virtual machines. So then we're kind of limited to what the customer already has installed in their VM. And so that's part of what we're addressing with the Linux VMOS Analyzer. So kind of to give an overview of how this would work, the VMOS Analyzer is that the whole idea is similar to the quality check, which is to compare the configurations of a Linux machine to our recommended configurations and tell you if there are any outages or any warnings. So the way this works is it runs within a Linux VM. And so we created a Terraform and Ansible scripts to be able to create this very easily. This is on our GitHub site. And so you can create that VM very easily. And you can also add your own custom checks if you have custom software, custom configurations that you want to be regularly checking for. It's very easy to add those. They're generally written in Python or Perl. Basically, any Linux script-based language is fine. And then we go and use the support config tool specifically in SUSE Linux. And what that does is it's automatically installed into the operating system. And it's a tool that SUSE uses to collect information and do support cases. So we use the same kind of mechanism. And so that goes out, collects all this information from your VM. It obfuscates any passwords that are being used in any of the resources. And then it packages that all up into one file that you can upload to SUSE, you can upload it to Microsoft, or you can, in this case, transfer it onto your OS Analyzer virtual machine and then run that analyzer. It generates an HTML output that is really comparing the results of that output. So why don't I go ahead and show this? I have a sample output here, if I can find it on my, all right, there we go. And so we ran this against one single virtual machine. And so you can see that it goes and checks all kinds of different conditions. In this case, there were 550 rules or patterns on my support config analyzer. Here, I only had 30 that were applicable to this server. But let's just take a quick look. And a lot of this is, we're really reusing the SUSE support config analyzer tool. And so we get a lot of health checks and things like that right from that tool. So like this basic health part is checking that, for example, I don't know, the memory used is only 35%, no swapping, you know, some basic health that's really informationally very nice. But we've also added this category of AzSAP, and we've gone and checked some of the settings that you typically have in a pacemaker cluster and, or in a SAP environment. So here are a couple that we checked, which is, this is always kind of an issue, is if you do a CRM resource move or migrate, we can, that tool, the command puts in location constraints into your cluster. Well, if you forget about those, it'll change how the cluster works. So we like to let people know about that. So here we're saying, oh, in this case, there aren't any of those, you're safe. So we evaluated that as a success. Nice thing here is that we can click on these and get more information about the actual configuration. So I think that's really nice. Super.
And you have also a few AzSAP checks with warning as an example.
Yeah, so when the configuration is not what we recommend it to be, that would either be a warning or a critical, or if there's something that could be a little bit better, it might come as recommended. We haven't done that with any of the AzSAP rules yet. So definitely these areas here would be the most important areas to take a look at.
So Ross, you mentioned that you're using the SUSE tool to do the analyzing. Does it mean that it only works on SUSE, or would it also work if I have my SAP HANA system running on Red Hat, for example?
Yeah, well, good question. Right now, it only runs under SUSE, but we have supporting Red Hat on our roadmap. And so the Red Hat SOS report is very similar. It's not the exact same configuration, but we're planning on supporting this tool under Red Hat as well.
Super. And I think you mentioned at the bottom that there were like 400 checks or something like that that are potentially available. So, or 500, 550. This is something that comes from our GitHub repo, or where are these patterns coming from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the support config analyzer tool, SUSE has created a bunch of rules themselves. So for example, these ones that are in basic health, those are all from SUSE. So they're directly supported or generated by their organization. And then we've gone and created rules ourselves, and we continue to develop more rules based on the results of best practices and support cases that we're handling. So so we have both.
But we are.
One other thing I wanted to mention is, I think I said this a little earlier, is that if you have your own rules, you can add that here as well. So so let's say that you have say you want to do a desired state check kind of thing, which would be, I always want to have my antivirus running, and maybe I want to check that the antivirus is not operating against my database volumes. You could add those rules in here, and I've had customers take this and basically via cron or whatever, that you can run this periodically in your environment, move all the support config files, output files to one location, and then run that and get a comprehensive report of your environment.
Cool.
So yeah.
How would the customer, let's say, get those SAP specific checks from where they would come? Would they download from some GitHub, or because you're
and that's our Terraform and Ansible scripts that we have to create this whole thing, they go out to the GitHub and get those packages automatically.
Super.
Yeah, so it's like just a handful of commands that you have to run to create the VMOS analyzer, and all that's handled for you.
Cool.
Nice.
And so, Jitendra, you wanted to go and talk about the inventory checks, right?
Yep. So thank you, Ross. That was great. So I'll share my screen and we'll quickly jump into inventory checks for SAP and what it does for our partners and customers. So inventory checks for SAP, as I was discussing, it's more of a Azure workbook. We have written a lot of queries that run in the backend, and I'm just trying to share my screen right now. What is the prerequisite when you want to access Azure inventory workbook? Really, like, you just need to have a read-only access on the subscription that you want to assess, right? There is no other prerequisite. All the checks that we are going to execute as part of inventory checks for SAP are making use of Azure Resource Graph Query. So those are all read-only. So there is no real risk for customers. And what we are aiming to do with this is we want to encourage our customers to collaborate with us and share their feedback. And like, we will be also sharing all the queries with our customers so they can really play and then share what their business requirements look like. So just to answer the last question, so all the tools are available on the GitHub today. So you can go on to our repository, SAP and Azure Scripts and Utilities, and you will see there's a tools and framework, and you will be able to access deployment checklist, inventory checks for SAP, and then these are the two that Ross covered, Linux, VMware, and Azure. And then we also have an Excel sheet here. Right, so let's quickly go through the inventory checks for SAP. Now, inventory checks for SAP is Azure Workbook, and it's integrated within Azure Portal. So you will be able to access it via Monitor. And there's a shortcut link that we will share. So what really happens is, and what's the aim that we are trying to do with Azure inventory checks for SAP is, we want our customers to have immediate visibility of what is being deployed within the subscription. So now if you see right now, I've selected all subscription. So it's giving you a visibility of like how many virtual machines are running in the selected subscription, how many managed disks are there, and what different SKUs are in place. Similarly, like, it talks about ANF storage, and then it talks about application gateway, load balancer, and storage accounts. We believe these are the Azure resources that are really like used by most of the SAP and Azure deployment. And we believe like our customers really want to have a visibility of what's being like deployed. So let me select one of the subscriptions just to give you a demo. So basically what happens is like one of the use cases, SAP, like customer is planning to go live, and they are like waiting and saying, okay, let's do a quick final check and make sure everything looks healthy. So as soon as you select a subscription, you saw it executes the query. So all the data is real time, right? So this is one of the management view that you can use, but then the other view is like by list. Now, like if you are, on the nth like hour of your go live, you just want to verify, okay, how many M series I'm using, or like generally like in a day-to-day business, you just are curious to understand like, okay, how many D8s I have. So you can simply filter by SKU name, and then it will list out like how many SKUs are available. So you have like immediate visibility. Similarly, you can use any other M series, or like, so it's basically looking for the text. You will also have an option to download the data for offline review. And similarly, like you can do it for managed disk and storage and the NF resources. So this bit really covers your inventory. So now you have a visibility in that, okay, I have in my selected subscription, I'm using 37 virtual machines, 38 managed disk, 72 storage account, and I don't have any NF account in the selected subscription. Now, other areas that we are covering as part of Azure Inventory Checks for SAP is compute, storage, network, then orphan resources. Then we have a configuration checks, monitoring. And next step is really like if you have any feedback, or if you want to collaborate with our team, like please feel free to connect with us, and we can make it really like open source collaboration. So under compute, what are the areas that we are focusing? So we really want to focus or give customer visibility of the areas like, okay, first is like summary, how many virtual machines are up and running and how many virtual machines are in deallocated. Then if you click on compute list, it lists out all the virtual machines, what are the state, what is the SKU you're using, what is the operating system, from where this image is coming, and what is the image version, and then where's image SKU. Now you will see like there are some columns where like we are putting some logic to say, okay, indicate. And then in under OS image SKU, you will see like there's like more of an information. Now for these kind of areas where like customer is not sure like why Microsoft is or this Azure work is highlighting areas, you can simply go and say show help, and it will add more text to explain what's going on. And it will also link to our Microsoft link, where customer will really understand, okay, this information really means my SKU is not second generation, and nowadays like we are expecting our customers to use second generation. It's not really an error, but it's more about, there's a scope for consideration to always make use of second generation OS SKU. The other view that you can have is like there's a functionality of like filter text. So you can simply say, okay, I'm interested in like VM3, what's going on? So it will basically filter all the VMs with VM3 in it, and you can quickly see like what's going on, what are the different columns are available. Now that's one view. The other area of interest will be when you are doing a quality checks or you're running pre-go live checks, you can really filter on or sort out any one of the column to see like, okay, if there are any variations, right? So I'm having some problem with my access right now. Right, so I will wait. So basically, and then you will be able to download all the data that is visible as part of Azure Inventory Checks for SAP. The other checks that we are highlighting is like compute extension. So if you have any problem with your compute extension, you will be able to clearly, like quickly verify that, okay, something is not available kind of. So one of the area will be like boot diagnostics. You can simply sort out to say, show me like all the virtual machines where boot diagnostics is not enabled by default, right? So it will sort out, and you will see the list of virtual machines where boot diagnostics is not enabled. So now customer got an idea, okay, there are some virtual machines where they can consider to enable boot diagnostics, or otherwise when they are doing troubleshooting, at that point in time, they might have to consider enabling boot diagnostics. The other area is like compute extension. So this is one of the area where like we have a monitoring prerequisites where like you need to enable AEM, right? So it will basically list all the extensions that you have on all the virtual machines in your selected subscription. And you can do the same logic, like you can filter with the virtual machine name, and then you can see like what's going on. One of the other feature that we have is like, if you are not really sure, like, hey, what's going on with my virtual machine, you can simply click on VM name here, and then it opens a new context, and then it will take you to that virtual machine. So you're not leaving inventory checks here. You are basically like able to access the virtual machine details from the inventory checks directly, and then once you review, you can come back.
I'm
Now
just
that,
thinking, JT.
Oh, go ahead.
Also for the SAP extension, I mean, this is a kind of officially prerequisite for the support. So that's sometimes what customer very often forgets, and that's really a nice tool to get an overview and see where it is actually missing, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And then you also just want to have a quick visibility during your pre-go live checks if there are any failures. So what happens is you can just click on VM extension status. Now you are basically you are very close to your go live. You don't have time to go through each and every VM. So you just need a list of everything in one go, and then just filter by text to say what are the extensions that are in failed status. Right, I'm having problem with my Explorer, Internet Explorer right now. So that option is also available.
So, looking at this, actually, I think, why is this only available for SAP? I think this could also be valuable for a lot of customers that are not even running SAP on Azure, but they to get an overview of my virtual machines, to get an overview of the disks that I have. I think you mentioned before that I can also see what are the disks that are not attached to a virtual machine and stuff like that. So to really, for me, that's actually, I mean, it's fantastic, obviously, that we're offering this in the context of SAP, but I actually think there could also be a huge value for customers that are just using Azure, not for SAP specifically.
Yeah, and you're right. So why we are calling it as an inventory checks for SAP, there are some of the configuration like accelerated networking, right? Or load balancer configuration. Now with load balancer configuration, we have specific guidelines to say okay, always enable floating IP, or use HA ports. So we have written a logic by which it will verify those settings. So that's why we are basically saying if customer is using those kind of components, what checks we are running is in line with SAP and Azure best practices.
Great.
But you're right. I mean, they don't really, I mean, they can make use of it for non-SAP workload as well. But then the logics and the highlights like warning errors are more specific to SAP. Right. So there are orphan resources. We indicate how many orphan NICs are there, how orphan NSG, ASG, load balancer, and ANF pool. So this is really to encourage customers to follow best practices. Now, sometimes customers will see a lot of orphan disk in their region or in their selected subscription, and they might worry about why I have so many orphan disk. So when they click yes, it basically explains that there is a potential that there are disks available in your subscription, because by default, Azure will not delete your disk attached to the virtual machine when you decommission or delete a virtual machine. And that's by design, because we don't want to delete any data unintentional, right? So that's why if a customer is not following SOP, there's an opportunity for them to say, okay, from now on, this is what we need to do. Once we delete virtual machine, we also need to make sure all the associated resources are also deleted, right? Similarly,
they are paying for the orphan resources, right? Yeah. So that will help them to reduce the costs. So.
It seems like after a migration, I have experienced lots of customers who have been creating virtual machines and disks as they need them, and then afterwards forget to clean that all up, and then they wonder why their costs are so high, because and what this is going to do is make it so much easier to go analyze that.
Yeah. And we have load balancer or ANF pool as well. So load balancer is basically you have created a load balancer, but then you have not defined backend pool. So that is what the logic is to say, okay, there's a orphan load balancer. Similarly, if you have a ANF capacity pool, but then you have not created any volume, then it will indicate there's a orphan ANF pool, because you will still be paying because you have created a capacity pool there. So under configuration checks, what we are really highlighting is we highlight your accelerated networking, public IP addresses, then your backups, right? So these are the some of the areas that we focus. So basically, if you can see like how many virtual machines are not enabled with accelerated networking, or how many public IPs are there in the selected subscription. Now, by design, we do not expect any public IP to be part of spoke network, but there might be some use cases like Bastion port, or like you can have your application gateway SAP router based on how customer is designing. But the intention of this is really to give them visibility. If they know, okay, I'm using some public IPs, let's say 5, and then if they come here and see like there are like 46 is too much, right? And then they can basically download the data and send it to the respective team to say like, hey, come on, let's review what's going on. The other areas are backups. Now, what we do is like when we are going live, we just want to make sure all virtual machines are protected. Now, under this, like it will list all the virtual machines where Azure backup is not configured. Now, if customer is using third party, then of course they will expect a long list. But then if they are using Azure backup, they do not expect any list. So if there is any data coming there, that means there are virtual machines that are missed from a backup configuration perspective. And that's what like we really observe. In my personal experience, like when I run this report on my customers, they often see like, okay, there are virtual machines where accelerated networking is not created or enabled, right? Or like your backup is not configured. So many customers like really go and use automation. Sometimes if there's a glitch or like, because of different automation, sometimes these kind of settings will miss. Right, so this is really a good check for customers to say like, okay, we have deployed everything. Let's quickly verify if everything is looking great. So this is one of the example, Holger, that you asked. Like, so basically, we are focusing on HA ports and floating IP, whether it's enabled or not. If it is not enabled, then we will indicate warning. And similarly, if customer is confused, like why we are highlighting for TCP, then they can select show help, and then it basically share the information that is already documented in SAP Note to say what recommendations are recommended for SAP on Azure best practices. And then we are also collecting some of the monitoring data. So because as part of Azure resource query, what we do is like we scan the platform. So data is already available there, and we are just executing these queries to get you the visibility. Right, that's why like we are not storing any data in any blob storage, and we don't really need any compute. That's why we are able to keep this as a value add. So there is really no cost to the customer to make use of our tools and product as part of tools and frameworks. So quickly moving on. So we have application gateway and Azure NetApp in line with the same like what we do for load balancer. The other area is monitoring. Now, when you are doing your migration, you need to have visibility what's going on, right? And then there are different areas like you want to monitor your CPU throughput, disk IO. So that bit will be covered by monitor. So this is like very much standard view where you will be able to quickly visualize if there's any virtual machine with very high CPU. Right. So for example, if there's a virtual machine like running at 25%, if you click on 25%, it basically loads another context where like it will indicate how much is your how much is your CPU utilization, disk read write, and network. One of the area that I really wanted to highlight under monitoring is Azure Resource Health. Now, this is a feature in preview. What we are also giving customer with visibility is like they can really go and see how many virtual machines in the selected subscription are not available, right? Or what are the status of that? And if there's any virtual machine that is not available, whether it's not available because of customer initiated action or platform initiated action, right? So this kind of visibility will also be available. Right, and then if they click on this, like it basically takes you to the virtual machine resource health view. Now there are different tabs available here. So there can be questions saying, okay, it can be like, again, time consuming. You don't really want to click on so many tabs to get to the data. So for that, what we are looking for is like we are working towards making it more like a early watch report, right? Where like a customer can go and select, I want to see a report. So once you select report equals to yes, it's basically remove all the tabs and show all the data in a single page view. And that basically only highlights the problematic area. So initial view will be a quick overview of all the resources that you have in your subscription. And then it will indicate what are the areas that customer need to react on. So basically, it will list all the virtual machines where your accelerated networking is not set up. It will also indicate if there are like orphan resources, right? And then customer can simply create a PDF, and that's where like we are working towards. So our North Star with this is really to get to a stage where we can create an automated PDF that can reach our customers' inbox on a like weekly basis, and they can just quickly see, okay, how many extensions are in failed status. So they will be able to see like, okay, these are the virtual machines where extension is failing. So they can also see like, okay, this is Qualys agent version 1.0 auto upgrade is set to false and it is in failed status. So this will keep on giving them views, right? What's going on within their subscription. Right.
That's really cool.
Super.
Yep. So yeah, so this is what like we have as part of our health check. We really like want to encourage our customers and partners to go through it, right? And we are very much open for all the feedbacks. We are making a few changes. So we are also bringing a filter at resource group level. So if you have SAP ECC and you are creating a resource group per SAP product like ECC BW, you will be able to basically go and say, okay, show me only ECC Azure resources. So it's easier for you to just verify like what's going on, because sometimes customer will be like working on ECC migration or ECC like upgrade or like, you know, a different minor or major release. So that's where like we are working right now.
Yeah. So being able to filter by SID, and that's based on tags, right?
Yes, so there is option for like tag filtering, plus there is also option for resource group filter, right? So for example, if a customer is deploying ECC and if they are calling SAP RG_ECC, once they select SAP ECC, it will basically filter all the resources under that resource group, and you will be able to quickly verify like if there are any orphan resources in that resource group, or if there are any virtual machine in that resource group where accelerated networking is not configured.
You know what I really like? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I'm just looking this list overview, and I was always looking for something similar, and looking all the time. It helps because just to give you see, I'm seeing okay, it's an availability zone, it's a region, it's a PPG or availability set. It is really helpful. I mean, it is helpful because just to go there are so many in one SAP system, could be 40, 50 VMs. Yep. It is not easy to get an overview of all those things, you know, and there are millions of detail, and it's hard to jump from one to one, so to say. So it is definitely useful tool.
Yeah, I really like the ability to see what things are part of a PPG right there in a size view, because otherwise it's really hard to see that.
Yeah.
No, that's really great, Jitendra. Thank you so much. And what I really like to just recap, that we help customers at the very beginning with an Excel guide, so they can just do this even before getting their hands dirty with Azure. They can already start and prepare, and then with the tools like what we saw, the health check, with the VMOS capabilities, that we can really analyze and see, is the landscape ready, is the configuration correct, that potentially also on an ongoing process I can check, like what Goran mentioned, maybe some new recommendations came in, maybe some new kernel parameters are now recommended, that I can just run this report and get insights on my environment. And then finally, once it is already running, once I have it all there, that I have with this inventory check, the capability to really see what's happening, to really get an overview of, I like the example, Ross, that you mentioned in a migration, that sometimes there are leftover virtual machines or disks that, yes, everything is running great, but the inventory check would highlight or would be able to showcase and indicate that there are some abundant resources, and I can now go in and clean them up and some stuff like that. So I think it's really amazing the work that we're doing to help the customers get started, but then also help them running their SAP system on Azure. So really cool.
Yep.
Good. With this, I think, thank you so much. I learned a lot. Was very insightful, great demonstration there. And I'm sure in the next version of the health check, or maybe you come up with some new cool tools, then we'll have you again on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And what I would say to everyone who's interested is feel free to put feedbacks or what have you on the GitHub, and we're glad to start that conversation. And even if you have changes, pull requests, we're happy to consider those as well.
Yep.
Cool. Great. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.